Welcome to The Explainer. We're about to take a deep dive into one of the most well-known executions in all of history, but we're going to look at it from a totally different angle, a modern medical one. We're setting aside all theology to focus purely on the physiological and historical facts. What really happened to the body of Jesus of Nazareth?
Okay, so let's just get right to the core question here, one that doctors and historians have wrestled with for a long, long time. I mean, from a purely physiological standpoint, what is it that actually kills a person during crucifixion? Now, to answer that, we're not just going to guess. Our entire analysis is based on this incredible landmark investigation that was published back in 1986 in the Journal of the American Medical Association, or JAMA. This wasn't just one person's opinion. It was a whole team of medical experts who dug into everything from ancient texts to modern anatomy to piece this all together. So, our investigation doesn't start at the cross. No, it starts 12 hours earlier. We're about to see how a whole cascade of trauma began long before that final act, just systematically breaking down the body and setting the stage for everything that was to come. Just look at this timeline. It's just relentless. There's no sleep. He's being marched back and forth between trials, a total of 2.5 miles, by the way. And all of this is happening on top of intense stress and physical beatings. The key thing to realize here is that he's already severely weakened before the main ordeal, the scourging, even kicks off. Now, the JAMA paper points out something fascinating. That immense mental anguish might have triggered an extremely rare condition called hematidrosis. This is wild. It's not just sweating. It's when the capillaries in your sweat glands actually rupture. So you're sweating a mixture of sweat and blood. From a medical standpoint, this is huge because it would have made the skin incredibly fragile and tender, basically predisposing it for way more damage during the flogging. All right, let's move on to the next stage of trauma, the Roman scourging. Now, this was standard procedure, a legally required preliminary to every Roman execution. But this was designed to do way more than just inflict pain. It was a medical catastrophe all on its own. The tool they used was called a flagrum, and believe me, it was a brutal piece of work. It had these leather thongs, but they were embedded with heavy iron balls to cause deep bruising, and sharp pieces of sheep bone to just slice the skin open. This wasn't just a whip, it was literally engineered to tear a person's body apart. And the medical result of this? It's just devastating. You've got deep bruises from the iron balls. The bones are tearing into the muscles underneath the skin. The JAMA article literally describes it as creating quivering ribbons of bleeding flesh. This leads to a huge amount of blood loss, which starts something called hypovolemic shock. That's basically a state where your body is losing so much blood your heart just can't keep up. So even before the cross, a medical countdown to death has already begun. So the victim is now in a state of pre-shock, right? He's severely weakened, he's bleeding. From this point on, the actual mechanics of the crucifixion itself are, well, they're brutally efficient and anatomically precise. You know, contrary to a lot of art you might see, the condemned person only carried the horizontal crossbar, the patibulum. But even so, this thing weighed between 75 and 125 pounds. The JAMA study makes a crucial point. Jesus was already so weak from the scourging that he couldn't carry it. That's why they had to get Simon of Cyrene to do it. And that detail tells you everything you need to know about his physical state before he was even nailed to the cross. Okay, now this is something you've probably seen in a million paintings, but it's actually wrong. You see, the myth is that the nails went through the palms of the hands. But think about it. The soft tissue there just couldn't support a person's body weight. It would just rip right through. The reality, which is backed out by both archaeology and even the Shroud of Turin, is that the nail went through the wrist. It created this secure anchor point among all the bones and ligaments there, locking the arm to the cross. And the placement of that nail, it was anatomically devastating. We're talking about a 5 to 7 inch iron spike being driven right where it would crush or completely sever the large median nerve. Can you imagine that? It's not just a constant dull pain, it's bolts of fiery electric shock type pain shooting up both arms every time there's even the slightest movement. This placement was, without a doubt, designed for maximum suffering. So let's connect the dots here and see how all this trauma builds to the final cause of death. Because as truly unimaginable as the pain was, the pain itself wasn't the primary killing mechanism. No, the real weapon here was the body's own physiology, completely turned against itself. And this is really the key question, isn't it? Because the true cause of death for most people who were crucified lay in this simple but absolutely torturous physiological trap, all centered on the simple act of breathing. Okay, check this out. For you and me, breathing in is the active part. Exhaling is passive. You just relax and the air goes out. On a cross, that gets flipped completely upside down. The weight of the body pulling down on the arms locks the chest muscles in a state of inhalation. So breathing in becomes the passive default position. To breathe out, well, that becomes an agonizing, deliberate, and active process.
So this is where it becomes this absolutely horrible cycle. To breathe out, you have to push up on your nailed fate. And when you do that, you're putting your entire body weight on that searing pain. At the exact same moment, your wrists are twisting on the spikes, which just fires up those damaged nerves again. It's this impossible choice, over and over: suffocate or endure absolute agony. Every single breath is a battle, and eventually your body just gives out. You can't push anymore, and that's it. Death by exhaustion, asphyxia.
So, as the JAMA article concludes, death on the cross wasn't just one thing. It was a cascade of physiological failures. You've got two main culprits: hypovolemic shock from all that blood loss during the scourging, and then exhaustion asphyxia, basically suffocating because you're just too exhausted to keep forcing yourself to breathe. And on top of that, things like dehydration and heart failure were just speeding the whole process up.
Now, let's take a look at the final moments and the medical evidence that provides a pretty clear verdict that death had, in fact, occurred. You know, when Roman soldiers wanted to speed things up, they had a method called crurifragium. They'd just break the victim's legs with a heavy club. And once that happened, you couldn't push up to exhale anymore. You'd suffocate within minutes. The fact that the soldiers saw Jesus was already dead and didn't break his legs, well, that's a key piece of historical evidence that the source points to, and it confirms his death was unusually rapid.
The final act was a spear thrust into the side, to be absolutely sure. The account says blood and water flowed out, and there's a clear medical explanation for that. The water was almost certainly serous fluid that had built up around the heart and lungs because of all the physical trauma. The blood would have come from a direct puncture of the heart. So this last wound wasn't what killed him. It was a grim but clear medical confirmation that death had already happened.
And this right here, this quote from the JAMA article just says it all. You know the word excruciating? The word we use for the worst possible pain you can imagine? It comes from the Latin excruciatus, which literally means out of the cross. Think about that. The sheer horror of this method of execution is baked right into our language. It's unforgettable. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, it just goes to show you how looking at a historical event through a modern medical lens gives us this stark, unforgettable understanding of the absolute limits of human endurance. It really reveals, in cold, clinical detail, the brutal mechanics of a death that was designed for the maximum possible suffering.